Hi, welcome, and thanks for joining in the series we're doing called Fighting for Mental Health During COVID-19. My name is Al Westerman, and I want to first let you know why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because mental health problems are more prevalent now than they've been ever. And I really care. I really care about what happens to you, but beyond that, I believe that you can move past this. I do not believe this is going to be something you're going to have to deal with for the rest of your life. You are not alone. You are struggling with many other people, and there is a way out. This is not a life sentence. Today we're going to be talking, over the last week we talked about vitamin D, and this week we're talking about how to use acute stress to fight chronic stress. Next week I'm going to talk about my own journey and some of the things that I've learned on how to combat mental health as well. So, to introduce today, we have Dr. Gary Schlifer coming in. Now, Dr. Gary has a podcast. It's the Sapien Podcast. It's actually my favorite podcast, and he co-hosts with Brian Saunders. Dr. Gary spends the first couple minutes talking about how he started the Sapien Podcast, and then he really starts getting into the material about how rest isn't always the answer. So stick with us. It gets better as it goes, and the ending is, in my opinion, absolutely amazing. So thank you for joining us. Please check out some of our earlier videos. The first one I did about reframing the situation I feel is really, really helpful. So I hope you check that one out as well. All right, thank you, and I hope you enjoy the video.
All right, good morning, Dr. Gary. Good to see you.
Good morning, Al. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So thank you so much for joining us, as today we're talking about how to use acute stress to fight chronic stress in terms of mental health. So I just to introduce some of our viewers to you, I guess the best way I could introduce them is I have been waiting my whole life, as someone who grew up overweight and unhealthy. I've been waiting my whole life for there to be just a reasonable view, for there to be someone who just took it, all the evidence. They looked at all the diets, they looked at history, they looked at the future, they looked at every single angle, and they just tried to have a well-reasoned, well-balanced approach. And I finally found it. It was the Sapien Framework. And so Dr. Gary and his partner, Brian Saunders, started, when did you guys start Sapien?
It's been like 5 years.
Really?
Yeah, it's been like 5 years, and it really took kind of grew wings in the last couple of years, maybe 2 years. Just a quick story, I was struggling too. I finished my training, I finished my residency. I'm an internal medicine specialist, and I was still struggling to figure out how to be healthy every day. And the thing that really stuck with me is that unless I was exercising for an hour or two a day, which I love to do, especially during my training, it was a way for me to control my mental health. It was a way, we'll get into it, but it was an acute stressor I would put on myself every day, despite whatever happened, to settle myself down. And there were moments, rotations, or just months where I couldn't do it. And I'd see myself not holding that form I had, not feeling as good, not sleeping as good. And it always bothered me, because I'm like, there's no way a human being has to train that hard. And I was training hard to maintain a high quality of self, of well-being. And I actually went on a snowboarding trip, another one of my ways to maintain my mental health, with one of my best friends, Yaniv, and Brian Sanders, who ended up being partners. And we started talking about this stuff. And Brian brought up his exploration into the low carb and animal-based diet space. And I challenged him because I was taught the exact opposite of that.
Yeah.
And me and Yaniv were really working together as best friends to try to figure out, like, we want to be really healthy. We want to go into our 30s rocking and rolling. Like we did not want to have this like slow decline that so many of our friends were already starting to have. And that's really how it started. Brian kind of challenged me. He's a really smart engineer. And we've always had that kind of rapport where we can challenge each other and not get mad, but actually open each other's mind, which is what really people need to be willing to do, is have a communication with someone who might not agree with them and not get so upset and just like think about it. And that's where Sapien was born, and we started talking about ancestral medicine, or thinking about health through our ancestry. And we started talking about my ancestry as a Russian immigrant, and Yaniv's history as a Israeli guy from Israel, and Brian's history, coming from Hawaii. And we just started seeing patterns, and it evolved from there. And we started talking about nutrition and exercise and stress management.
Yeah.
We went down the vitamin D rabbit hole, and that's a
Yeah.
really important topic. So it all just started growing, and we started the Sapien podcast because Brian Sanders has this great podcast, Peak Human Podcast, which your listeners need to listen to. And
I've listened to almost all of them.
I'm sure you have, and it's so powerful. I'm still listening. I go back and I listen to guys like Ben Bickman and Nina Teicholz to relearn and re-inspire me. And so then we started the Sapien podcast for fun because I needed somewhere to talk to someone, and we're like, hey, we should record it. And we started getting a lot of love, and I started getting a lot of patients in my clinic that were inspired by it. And it snowballed from there. And man, what a blessing, because the work I'm doing at my clinic, Evolve Healthcare, is so powerful, and it's so much more meaningful than just the Western medicine practice that I had before, and certainly more meaningful than the hospital medicine I was practicing at when that was all happening, which was really, not good, to say the least. So yeah, I mean, Sapien grew from there, and now I'm so lucky to be able to, join shows like yours, and try to get my voice out, because with COVID, we're seeing so many problems, not just related to the infection, but to mental health.
Oh, massive.
People really struggling, people that had their, exercise habits and the gyms closed, or people that were really figuring out how to eat, or something really bad, they lost a loved one, and that's down a bad pathway. So to me, it's such an important time to be able to have a voice. And I think so many doctors that practice for uh, groups or big corporations, they don't feel comfortable saying what they really think. So I don't really think I'm like the only one out there saying this stuff, but I do think a lot of my colleagues are frankly afraid to say what they really think. So I feel like it's my mission to just be honest, and like you said, I try not to take a side. I try to think for myself, and I try to integrate everything I have experienced and learned with what's happening now. And I think that's the most important part, is we've never seen what's happening now. This is all new. This is, it was already weird before COVID, and now life is extra weird. And I think acknowledging that is step one, and then figuring out how to live your best life.
Right. Because like it's our natural state, right? When something happens, when our normal gets disrupted, apathy is our natural fallback, right? I mean, when we're in Ontario and we just had another lockdown, and I just felt defeated, I did, and I griped and all that. And afterwards, I made a really hard decision. I was going to do 100 pull-ups. I didn't want to do those pull-ups, but I did them anyway. And it's your voice is a really great voice in this time, because you keep preaching connection, and I really appreciate that. So this is the way I would kind of describe the Sapien Framework. And I'm not even talking about you guys have your 4 pillars, which I love. Check out episode 11 of the Sapien Podcast. That's probably the best one to check out, 11?
Absolutely. That's if a patient comes to see me and they're interested in what I have to talk about, I'm like, did you watch that episode? Because I used to sit there for 30, 40 minutes, try to explain this to someone. And I think it just wore on me. So when we launched the 2nd season of the podcast, that was the concept. Like, hey, we have a nice studio. Let's give everyone that 45-minute breakdown of what we're talking about. Simple terms. We won't dive deep on this one. We'll just give everyone like a framework.
Yeah, it's perfect. And this is how I would describe it is, when you go to the dentist and your teeth just feel incredible, that's like how my body feels all the time. Like I can just tell, like you rub your tongue over your teeth and it's just like, oh my goodness, it's shiny. It's fantastic. You're seeing if you feel like that right now, And And when you don't feel like that, you notice something's off. I mean, if you typically ask someone how they feel, they will say fine.
Right.
Right? They feel fine.
Yeah.
And my feeling on a Sapien style diet is, or a diet within the Sapien framework, is that I feel amazing and fantastic. And if it was for no other reason, I would do it just for the hunger. Like, there is no hunger. I used to be ruled by my hunger, having to eat every 2 hours, and now I can eat 2 or 3 times a day, and it's absolutely no problem.
Oh
And
man,
so
love
fantastic. And just really quick, I'll mention that you guys did a podcast also on COVID and how to deal with that. And I think it was the most reasonable response to COVID I've ever heard. You hear people saying it's not a virus. You hear people saying it's the most deadly thing in the world. And then you have this incredibly reasonable thing talking about immune system, talking about maintaining connections. And it was just extremely well done. It was, so kudos to you. But let's get into the material today. So I heard a couple weeks ago, I heard you talking about using acute stress to fight chronic stress. And I love this concept. And I was just wondering if you could explain this to us, please.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is something that is becoming the pillar of at least my education and my patients. And I think it's a concept that will resonate with many people. So what makes us sick? Chronic stress makes us sick. And I use that term very generally. You know, the stress of COVID, the insecurities and the weirdnesses of life now, pressure to make money and work, eating a really unhealthy diet and feeling like beat down by it, um, social pressures, family issues, all of these things are chronic stresses that kind of break us down and we feel squashed by them. And like you said, one more thing happens and you go into this world of apathy where you're like, I can't anymore. It's too much. And that's the world we live in. And I think so much of that is driven by the fact that the world we have created does not match our biology. Like our what our bodies need, what we thrive on is not the world that's around us. As powerful as these computer screens are, spending too much time in them, spending too much time in your phone, it ends up being a chronic stress, especially all that information, the ads, the articles, all this stuff. It's just that's what it is, right?
Mm.
So the common idea of how you manage that stress is rest. Hey, go on a vacation. Hey, take a weekend off. Hey, go lie on your couch and rest. And for sure, there's a role for rest. I mean, of course, you exercise really hard. You need to let your body rest. If you've been, at it all day, writing something or working, yeah, you should probably rest your mind and do something else. But that rest is short-lived. And we've all been on a vacation where you come back and you get one nasty email, or you go back to work and it's an unpleasant day and you're right back to where you started. And that's because rest is good for kind of healing and recovering, but it doesn't do much to build your ability to manage this chronic stress. One way to think about it is you need to be a resilient person. You need to be able to take these chronic stresses. You need to be able to take bad news. You need to be able to process all this stuff and not let it break you down. So how do you build that resiliency? And I present this idea of acute stressors to build your resiliency. And what are these acute stressors? So I like to think about the ones that are free, that you can do every day at home. You can start today after you listen to this podcast. You can start thinking about these ideas as acute stressors that you can leverage. I also think about them as little toggles, right? You can pull this toggle and then you can pull this toggle on one day. You can pull that one and then this one in another day. And you don't have to just do the same thing every day, but you can have these different tools.
It's good.
So what are the tools? So I think about 5. There's more, but these are the 5 that I like to present to people all the time. So fasting. So when we talk about the Sapien diet and framework, we have a low carbohydrate, whole foods based diet. That's an animal based diet. But one of the key components is intermittent fasting. Fasting has all these amazing benefits. And please listen to some of my other podcasts if you have questions about it, because we talk about it in so much detail. But I think people have woken up to the idea that intermittent fasting is a meaningful strategy. And I consider it one of the most powerful strategies I've ever learned and teach others. So, but what it does is it creates a stress on your body. You no longer are in this fed state. Your body has to tap into your liver to make sugar, and it has to change its metabolic processes to start using ketones as energy. Um, and that creates some stress on your body, but your body wants that stress. It feels good. Your brain clears up. The brain fog goes away as you start using ketones instead of sugar in your brain. And all of these changes happen that make you feel stronger. And maybe that doesn't happen on day one, the first time you're fasting, but
Definitely not.
oh no. And that's something you could learn about in some of the other podcasts. But after some time, depending on who you are and what your history is, you really, it changes you and it makes you stronger. And you realize, oh my gosh, some days I'm just not going to eat. I'm going to do a 24-hour fast because it feels great. But it also feels a little bit like you're putting a challenge on yourself. So that's an acute stress that's nutritional.
Yeah.
When we talk about exercise,
Can I make a question first? Would it also help with blood sugar regulation? Because I would assume fluctuations in blood sugar would also be something that would make mental health struggles more prevalent, right?
Absolutely. And not just blood sugar. I think that's a great concept that is very important for everyone to think about, that you don't want your blood sugar spiking all the time and going on this roller coaster of I had breakfast full of sugar and then lunch full of sugar and then a snack and I'm on a roller coaster. But more so that when you're eating that way, or when your sugars are rolling like that, you're actually have hormonal changes. And it's these hormonal changes that are not good for you. It's the insulin changes. It's these changes in other hormones that trigger your hunger in a bizarre way. Like you shouldn't be that hungry if you ate 1,000 calories 2 hours ago. That's just not, just impossible. That's how our bodies are built, that I'm
I
going
was
to eat
there,
all
man.
and then be hungry. So it's because our food is addictive. It's been formulated, and the way we combine fats and sugars, it makes us addicted, and it's not healthy. It's very scary how oblivious so many people are to how this food is affecting them, and they just keep eating, and it's really,
It's
it's
extremely
poison.
powerful. Absolutely.
So, and that's what you were talking about, is how you're not hungry when you follow this kind of eating strategy, because you shouldn't be hungry all the time, because
Right.
we're not built to be hungry all the time. We get hungry, we feast, and then we fast. And that's a simple way to think about it. Some days you're not feeling so hot and you need to eat a little more, so you don't fast. But many, many days of the week, for me, it's 95% of the days in the month, I'm fasting at least 16 hours.
Yeah.
And I've started getting to the point where I don't even call the 16-hour a fast. That's just like baseline.
I like compressed eating window better than intermittent fasting for a term, but yeah, totally with you. So what's the second one?
All right, second one is exercise. So, but when we think about exercise, I try to explain it as high intensity interval training. When you look at evidence-based medicine and evidence in the world of sports medicine, it's really high intensity interval training that's been shown to grow muscle, make you stronger, cut visceral fat and abdominal fat, improve your cardiovascular system. So, I mean, that's this really important idea that no, it's not enough to get on the treadmill and go at a very moderate pace for 30 minutes and then catch half a sweat. Like, that's okay. It's better than nothing,
Yeah.
but you could be more intelligent about it and understand that if you do short bursts of significant exertion,
Yep.
so this is something more along the lines of sprinting um, or weight training. I like dynamic kinds of weight training, including kettlebells and kind of these more complex movements where you're doing like a shoulder press and a squat. So you're using your whole body. But the idea being that you exert yourself really hard, 70, 80, 90% of your maximum for 30 seconds, a minute, and then you rest. And you do these sets to create these stressors, which causes your body to grow. It causes your hormones to react in such a way that makes you stronger and more resilient. And importantly, since we're talking a lot about mental health today, it makes, if you can push your way through not feeling good, like not feeling comfortable, I should say, and like push that exercise to where you're sweating and breathing hard, the rest of life becomes easier.
Yeah.
It just does.
Yeah. No, and it's such a much better ROI the return on investment for high intensity, you can work out for 10, 15 minutes. And it's like, if you do, let's say, a couple sprint intervals, that's far better than doing for 10 minutes. That's far better than doing an hour of jogging.
Way better.
Yeah.
And all the, as I'm learning more about it myself, it's just overwhelmed with evidence based. Now, when I talk on my podcast, and I don't always try to quote the studies and stuff, because I think that there's a lot of people doing that, and I'm trying to communicate things on a more general term. So for one, there's an overwhelming amount of evidence to suggest that these kind of exercise habits are much more powerful. But on the flip side, if you think about our hunter-gatherer ancestors or just history, we are built to exert ourselves and then rest, exert ourselves and then rest. And I think that's an important concept, is that's how our body wants to respond. And this idea that we could run for long periods of time is also important, but that's not necessarily exercise. That's just what we're built to do. We are so built to move and use our bodies that you can just go on a jog for hours and hours, and if you're well trained, it's not even really like exercise. It's just what your body wants to do. You just feel great. So I think it's important to think about all those things, because we're built to move. We're built to be active, and we're definitely not built to sit in front of the computer for 8 hours a day like so many people.
Come on. Yeah, no, I'm with you. What's the third one, sir?
So the third and fourth one, I kind of think of together. It's heat therapy and cold therapy.
Oh, yeah.
So cold therapy, I think, has recently been made famous by Wim Hof, who, if you haven't heard of Wim Hof, please look up this guy. He's such an inspiration. And he actually, okay, so I'm going to package the next three as one. So you got the movement one, you got the nutrition one, and then you've got these kind of ways you can play with your body. And it's cold therapy, heat therapy, and deep breathing. And people are like, deep breathing is an acute stress? Yes. When you actually go through a series of deep breathing sets, whether it be a Wim Hof style breathing or there's a variety of other strategies, you challenge your body. It is intense. If you've never done it, please go try it. Just look up Wim Hof deep breathing strategies. Very, very simple. And just do it. And you're like, in 1 minute, you can change how your brain's biochemistry is working. It's so powerful. And it releases hormones that make you just feel amazing. It really does, right? So Wim Hof, and I love bringing him up because he actually takes two acute stressors and leverages them to be super healthy. And that's cold immersion therapy and deep breathing. He uses deep breathing as a way to control your autonomic nervous system and make it so you could tolerate the cold. And then the cold therapy itself, jumping into a cold bath, just something as simple as a cold shower. Some people even just take a cold icy rag and put it on the nape of their neck, because that's
I want to talk about that, because so for me to say, so I've been in this world for a bit. I had a cold shower 2 hours ago. I felt amazing. It's fantastic. I did, we're April here in Canada. The water's cold. It's like 45 degrees or something like that. Yeah. I went swimming yesterday. Fantastic. And I feel amazing afterwards. But for a lot of people, that's a hard place to get to, right? So I heard Ben Greenfield a couple of years talking about alternating in the, like, say, in the shower. Is that a good strategy? How do you get people started on?
I always, when I introduce these 5 concepts, I always say, if you're not fasting and if you're not doing HIIT, that should be your low hanging fruit. I think with the other 3, it's more challenging. Heat therapy, which is most commonly thought about as like going into a sauna, is much more pleasant. And I always explain to people, it's easier. And I always explain, usually if you've never done it before, first 5 or 10 minutes, you're warming up. The next 5 or 10 minutes, you feel great. And around 15 or 20 minutes, you're like, I need to get I'm hot. Yeah. And that's where the money's made. Like, that's where you need to stick in there for, you don't need to go crazy. It's like not 10 more minutes, but just push yourself. Maybe it's 2 or 3 minutes past your comfort zone. Maybe the next time it's 5 minutes past your comfort zone. But the idea is that it's past your comfort zone. That's the acute stress. And again, your body then releases something called heat shock proteins. It changes how some of your fat molecules start changing and start metabolizing energy, and it changes your metabolism. And so I always kind of say fasting, hit, if you can get your hands on a sauna or get into a sauna, start with the heat therapy, deep breathing, and then cold, because cold tends to be the most challenging. It's hard
Okay.
to convince someone to do it. But if that's something that inspires you and you really want to try, just it's as simple as turn on a cold shower. Now, if for day one, jumping into a cold shower is not a good idea. So there's two ways you could kind of get started with it. You can do your hot shower, get yourself worked up, and then end your shower with the cold but really cold, like not lukewarm. You're turning it all the way cold. Another way to do it though is to do a series of deep breathing protocols right before you go in the cold. And really, you should be doing that anyway. Doing the deep breathing will let you tolerate the cold and it'll make sure you don't pass out. And all these things, you got to be thoughtful and careful. I cannot do any of them justice in a 20 or 30-minute long podcast. You really have to like look into it and understand and connect with a practitioner that can guide you. There's a million books. Wim Hof has an app. This is a whole world, and I just encourage people to, if you're listening to this, let this be a portal into a world of health, and realizing that there's a million things you can do to make yourself healthier that are essentially free, and you can start today, and you don't need to do it for an hour or 2 hours or 4 hours and obsessively. You can just start chipping away. And even if you do a cold shower once a week and you do a 16-hour fast a few times a week, you're in a better place than you were the week before.
100%.
And I think that's really important, because everyone feels like, if I start working out, I need to go to a gym and I need to do it 3 days a week and I need to pay a trainer and blah, blah, blah. Like everything doesn't need to be so much. You just need to start chipping away at it. So if today you can cut your processed food out and start a 16-8 method where you eat for 8 hours a day and just get hydrated for the other 16, you will be healthier in 2 months or even a month than you were. It's
That, that
simple.
that's a good point, because some of the people listening are struggling fairly significantly with mental health right now, right?
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work in a day, it doesn't mean it doesn't work. The stuff takes time. Physiology takes a long time to change. How long did it take you to get in this state? Well, how long is it going to take to get out? It's not a snap bang done, right? But these things are building your resilience. Cold showers, when you're in that, Tom Bilyeu talks about this, and I love it. He's like, why do I take cold showers? Because they suck.
Yes.
And it starts the fight flight thing, right? And then instead of saying, I'm going to die, I got to run out of here, you say, I'm going to be okay. And then
Yeah.
this message of, I'm going to be okay, I can endure this, makes you more resilient, right? The same thing with the breathing. When you have the flight stimulated, right? That's what stress is all about. The fight flight is stimulated in your brain, and when you breathe, you're like, okay, there's no saber-toothed tiger trying to attack me. I'm gonna be okay. I'm so okay that I can just relax as deeply as I can, and I can do these breaths. And it's so, yeah, it's building your resilience, right? And I think that is absolutely brilliant. So
I love it. And I want to add to it this idea that a lot of folks that are struggling with depression are really struggling with anxiety. These two things come together. And anxiety oftentimes is this fight or flight response that's sort of poorly managed, because it's been associated with scary things, traumas, fear. And so when you induce the fight or flight response, essentially using these acute stressors, but you have control of it,
yes,
right?
come on.
You're doing it. You're taking control of your body. Really, you're taking control of your nervous system. And you start correlating these episodes of fight or flight with control and
Yes.
power, strength. And you start being the driver of your nervous system instead of being like this passive, having these experiences passively put on you. And and you get worried and anxious, or whatever happens that triggers your anxiety. Instead, you take control of that
Yep.
and you learn how to manipulate it, and you realize, oh my gosh, if I just deep breathe for 5 minutes, I can change how I not just feel, but how my nervous system is
Yep.
responding.
Well, it's myelinization, right? It's myelinization. You're creating new pathways, neural pathways. And instead of one of losing control, you're creating new pathways where you take control. That's powerful, man. That's the gist of it right there, right? Is you're rewiring your brain when you do these acute stressors. That is really good. Thank you, Dr. Gary. You have to go right now. So I want to honor your time and just thank you for it. You can check him out, Dr. Gary Evolve from Evolve Healthcare. And yeah, Dr. Gary, thank you so much. You've been a blessing to us, and I just want to say, God bless you, sir. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Al, thank you so much. And for everyone listening, if you ever need anything, I'm online. Reach out to me, and hopefully I'll come back here and we'll talk some more with Al.